The city wasn't sleeping, it was just turning its back. Liam Thorne's Bentley cut through the December night, a silent, warm fortress against the blizzard raging outside. Inside, the world was reduced to two things: the soft purr of the engine and the even softer breathing of his 4-year-old daughter, Alara, asleep in her plush car seat, clutching a stuffed unicorn named Sparkle. "Almost home, Firefly," Liam murmured, his voice a low rumble that held none of the sharpness he used to command boardrooms. He adjusted the rearview mirror just to look at her, a tiny, perfect creature swaddled in pink fleece. She was the only soft thing in his life, the only relic of a love that had ended too soon. Since Sarah's passing 2 years ago, Alara was his entire universe, a fragile star he had sworn to protect from every cold, hard edge of the world. The traffic light ahead turned red, and he eased the car to a halt. The wipers thumped a steady rhythm, pushing aside fat, relentless flakes. It was on one of these sweeps that his eyes caught a movement in the alleyway to his right. A huddled shape, barely distinguishable from the discarded trash bags, was wedged between a dumpster and a brick wall. A woman. She was curled into a tight ball, a thin, frayed blanket dusted with white. A shopping cart filled with what looked like her entire world stood guard nearby. Liam's jaw tightened. He'd built a billion-dollar empire on a foundation of ruthless pragmatism. He saw problems, assessed risks, and made decisions. Homelessness was a systemic issue, a sad byproduct of a broken society. He wrote checks to shelters, of course, large, tax-deductible ones. But personal involvement, that was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. He had Alara to think about. Just as the light turned green, a small, sleepy voice piped up from the back. "Daddy, why is that lady sleeping in the snow?" Liam's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She doesn't have a home, sweetheart." Alara was silent for a moment, processing. "But she'll be cold. I'm sure she'll be okay," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth as he pressed the accelerator. The car began to glide forward. He saw the woman shift then. She uncurled slightly, and in the dim, reflected light of a street lamp, he saw the bundle she was shielding with her own body. It wasn't just a bundle of rags. It was an infant, its face pale and tiny, swaddled against her chest. A jolt, sharp and unwelcome, shot through him. A baby. He drove another 20 feet, his corporate mind wrestling with a sudden, primal dread. "It's not your problem. Call a shelter in the morning. You have your own child to protect." And then Alara, with the devastating, unassailable logic of a child, shattered his defenses. Her voice, usually a melody, was now a blade of pure terror. "Daddy, her baby is freezing." The words hung in the warm air, sucking all the oxygen from the car. Liam's foot slammed on the brake. He looked in the mirror. Alara's eyes were wide, filled with tears of genuine, heartbroken panic. She wasn't asking, she was begging. In that moment, he wasn't Liam Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries. He was just a father, confronted with the image of another child suffering, and his own daughter's innocence demanding he do something about it. "Damn it," he whispered, a curse aimed at the universe, at his own hesitation. He threw the car into reverse, backed into a spot, and killed the engine. "Stay here, Alara. Do not unlock the door for anyone." He climbed out, the cold hitting him like a physical blow. The wind howled, stealing his breath. He strode toward the alley, his Italian leather shoes instantly soaked. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice stiff. The woman flinched, curling tighter around her baby, her eyes wide with fear. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, but hardship had carved years onto her face. Her lips were chapped and blue. "I'm not going to hurt you," Liam said, holding his hands up, feeling absurdly like he was negotiating a hostile takeover. "You can't stay here. It's a death sentence. For both of you. Leave us alone," she whispered, her voice raspy and raw. She pulled the thin blanket higher over the baby's head. "We're fine." "You are not fine," Liam stated, the CEO in him taking over. "That baby is not fine. I have a car. I'll take you to a shelter." "The shelters are full," she shot back, a flicker of defiance in her exhausted eyes. "I tried. They turned us away." Liam's plan, flimsy as it was, crumbled. He looked at the still, small form of the infant. A terrible, cold dread began to pool in his stomach. What if Alara was right? What if the baby was He made a decision. He pulled out his wallet, extracting a wad of cash that could have rented her an apartment for a month. Here, take this. Get a hotel room. She stared at the money as if it were a snake. I don't want your money. Frustration boiled over. What do you want? To freeze to death? To let your child die for your pride? Tears finally welled in her eyes, cutting tracks through the grime on her cheeks. You think it's pride? She choked out. You think I haven't been? Her words dissolved into ragged, body-racking sobs that were carried away by the wind. It was the sound of her breaking. And it broke something in him, too. He looked back at his car, at Alara's small, worried face pressed against the window. He thought of Sarah, of the promise he'd made to be a good man, not just a successful one. Get in the car, he said, his voice low and final. It was no longer a suggestion. It was a command, but one laced with a desperation he hadn't felt in years. Please. For the baby. He saw the war in her eyes, the ingrained fear of strangers, the bone-deep weariness, and the fierce, desperate love for her child. It was the last one that won. With a shuddering breath, she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Helping her to her feet was like lifting a ghost. She was light, trembling violently. He guided her in her shopping cart to the car, opening the passenger door. The warm air rushed out, a stark contrast to the alley's deathly chill. Alara watched, wide-eyed, as the woman, clutching her baby, slid into the leather seat, her entire body shaking. It's okay, Alara whispered to the woman, offering Sparkle the unicorn. We have a big, warm house. You and your baby can have my cookies. The woman didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead, tears silently streaming down her face, holding her baby as if it were the only real thing left in the world. As Liam drove away from the alley, the storm inside him was just beginning. Thorn Mansion wasn't a home. It was a monument, all cold marble and vast, echoing spaces. But tonight, as Liam ushered the shivering woman and her baby inside, it finally felt like it had a purpose warmer than impressing guests. Marta, he called out, his voice echoing in the grand foyer. His elderly housekeeper appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of their guests. Without a word, Liam began issuing orders, the familiar rhythm of command a comfort. Draw a hot bath. Prepare the guest suite in the east wing. Warm some milk and find something soft for the baby. Use the things from Alara's old nursery. Marta, to her credit, simply nodded and scurried off. The woman, who had whispered her name was Maya, stood frozen in the entrance, her worn sneakers leaving damp prints on the priceless Persian rug. She looked like a wild bird that had flown into a cathedral, terrified and out of place. The bath is this way, Liam said, his voice softer now. An hour later, the house had settled into an uneasy quiet. Maya, clean and dressed in borrowed sweatpants and a sweater, sat by the fireplace in the living room, her baby, a little girl she called Lily, swaddled in a thick, cashmere blanket, finally sleeping peacefully. Color had returned to the infant's cheeks, and her breathing was deep and regular. Alara was asleep on the sofa, her head in Maya's lap, Sparkle tucked under her arm. The sight was so profoundly domestic and wrong that it made Liam's chest ache. He handed Maya a mug of steaming tea. She's beautiful, he said, nodding toward Lily. Maya's eyes, now clear in a startling shade of hazel, filled with fresh tears. Thank you, she whispered, the words thick with emotion. You didn't have to. All of this. Anyone would have, Liam replied, the automatic, polite lie. No, Maya said, her gaze steady on him. They wouldn't. Most people look through you. You saw me. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire. What happened? Liam finally asked, the question hanging in the air. He wasn't asking as a CEO now, but as a man who had also known loss. Maya's story tumbled out in broken fragments. She was from a small town. She'd been a promising art student. She'd fallen in love with a man who promised her the world, only to leave her when she got pregnant. Her religious family had disowned her. She'd lost her waitressing job when her pregnancy became too obvious. The system was a labyrinth of waiting lists and closed doors. The final blow was being evicted from her apartment a week after Lily was born. I had a portfolio, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. My drawings. It was in my backpack. It was stolen last week at the bus station. It was the last thing I had of me. Liam listened, a cold knot of guilt and sympathy tightening in his gut. Her story was a cascade of misfortunes, a house of cards collapsing. It was the kind of story his board would reduce to a case study in poor life choices. But hearing it from her, seeing the raw pain in her eyes, it was just a tragedy. You can stay here, he heard himself say. Until you get on your feet. We have more than enough room. Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. Why are you doing this? He looked at Alara, sleeping so trustingly against this stranger. Because my daughter reminded me what it means to be human tonight. The days turned into a week. Maya, nourished by Marta's cooking and the security of a warm bed, began to blossom. She was gentle, intelligent, and wonderful with both Lily and Alara. She helped around the house without being asked, and Liam often found her quietly drawing on scraps of paper with a pencil Marta had found for her. The talent was undeniable, even in these simple sketches. A fragile, tentative peace settled over the mansion. Liam found himself looking forward to coming home from work, not to an empty house, but to one filled with the sounds of children and Maya's soft laughter. He started noticing things, the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the light in her eyes when she played with the girls. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since Sarah, and it terrified him. One evening, he found her in the library, looking at the only photo of Sarah he kept on the mantelpiece. It was from their honeymoon. She was stunning, Maya said softly. She was, Liam agreed, his throat tight. Maya turned to him, her eyes searching his. Alara has her smile. The observation, so simple and true, shattered the last of his defenses. In that moment, the careful distance he'd maintained collapsed. He was falling for this woman, this stranger he'd plucked from a snowstorm. The guilt was immediate and searing. Was he betraying Sarah's memory? Was he just vulnerable? The following night, he decided he couldn't live in the uncertainty any longer. The girls were asleep. He found Maya in the living room, sketching by the firelight. Maya, he began, his heart hammering against his ribs. These past days, having you here, it's felt like this house has a heart again. He took a deep breath. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. Not as a guest, as part of this family. Maya stared at him, her sketchpad falling to the floor. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, confusion, and something else, something that looked like profound, gut-wrenching anguish. Liam, no, she whispered, shaking her head, tears welling up. You can't. You don't understand. I understand that I've fallen in love with you, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. We can help you. I can help you. We can be happy. A sob escaped her, a sound of pure torment. She covered her face with her hands. You think you know me, she cried, her voice muffled. You think you saved me. But you don't know what I've done. Nothing you've done matters, he said fiercely, stepping closer. Your past doesn't matter. She looked up, her eyes blazing with a painful truth. My past, Liam, my past is you. The words didn't make sense. They hung in the air, nonsensical and strange. What are you talking about? He asked, a cold dread beginning to creep up his spine. Maya stumbled to her feet, backing away from him as if he were the danger. She went to her shopping cart, which stood neatly in the corner of the room, the last vestige of her old life. With trembling hands, she dug past the few threadbare clothes and pulled out a small, zippered plastic bag, the kind used to protect important documents from the rain. She threw it at his feet. I didn't want this, she wept, her body collapsing into a chair. I never wanted you to know. I just wanted my baby to be warm. Confused and alarmed, Liam bent down and picked up the bag. Inside was a single, worn, folded piece of paper. His hands, suddenly clumsy, unfolded it. It was a printed email. The header was from a prestigious private adoption agency. His eyes scanned the text, his brain refusing to process the words. Regret to inform you that the birth mother, Maya Street, James, has formally revoked her consent, effectively terminating the adoption process for the infant, Lily. His blood ran cold. He knew this email. He had read it a year ago, the final, devastating blow in his and Sarah's long, painful journey to adopt a child. Sarah had been too ill to carry a child, and they had been so close, so close to having a little girl named Lily. Until the birth mother changed her mind. His eyes, blurring with a storm of confusion and dawning horror, dropped to the bottom of the page. And there it was, the reason the agency had given for the sudden termination. Ms. Street. James has stated that the adoptive father, Liam Thorne, was personally unacceptable to her. He looked up from the paper, his world tilting on its axis. He stared at Maya, at the woman he had just professed to love. The homeless mother he had saved from the storm. Her voice was a broken whisper, filled with a lifetime of regret. "I was the art student you interviewed for the Thorne Industries scholarship," she said, her tears falling freely now. "You said my work was derivative and lacked commercial viability. You told me I'd never make it. You looked right through me. That scholarship was my only chance. When I lost it, I lost everything. And when I saw your name on the adoption papers, I was so angry, so broken, I punished you. I took Lily away from you." Liam stumbled back, hitting the wall. The air left his lungs. The twist of the knife was so profound, so cruel, he couldn't breathe. The homeless woman wasn't a stranger. She was the woman whose future he had coldly dismantled in a 10-minute interview. The child he had saved from the cold was the daughter he had already lost. And the love he thought was blossoming was built on a foundation of his own unwitting, devastating sin. He had saved them, yes. But he had been the one who cast them out into the cold in the first place.